Alright, so here we are in chapter 12 where we'll do some what-if analysis, goal seek, scenarios, all of that good stuff. So we're going to jump right into it. We've gotten this EX12-1 modular start file, and I've downloaded that, and I need to save this. And we'll call this EX12_projection. Alright, so on the first tab under projected revenue sheet, you'll see some data included. And let's go for C3 to E3. And we'll go to the data tab. And over on the right hand side, there's a forecast section, there's what if. So we'll click the what if. And in this case, we want to do some scenarios. So scenario, in this case, we'll click add. And we want to create this first one as our original revenue figures. Okay, so no change, we'll click OK. And it pulls up the data from the highlighted cells. We'll click OK, and that saves the original scenario. Next we want to hit add, and in this scenario we want to increase February, March, in April by $4,000 each. C3 to E3 is correct. We'll click OK. In this case, that changes to 79,189, 75,423, and 88664. So you can tab or click on each one of them and type those three values. We'll click add. And in this case, we want to create another one. It goes increase February, March, April by 10,000. That's changing C3 to E3. We'll click OK. In this case, then we have 85189, 81423, 94664. And the three characters. We'll click OK. Now we've got our scenario manager. If you highlight the increase by 10,000 and hit show at the bottom, you'll see how it updates in the background. Let's click on the increase by 4,000, we'll hit show, adjust accordingly, and then we'll go original figures, show, to put it back to where it was. We close, we'll save our work. So we've got those three scenarios built in the background. Another function you can do is once you've established those scenarios, you can generate what's called a scenario summary. So let's highlight B2 all the way over to I3. And we want to go to the Formulas tab. And we want to create from selection. We're going to name those cells based on the top row. So that's OK. If we click Name Manager, you'll see that it's assigned a month names to each one of those values. We'll hit close. Now we'll go to the data tab. We'll go to what if. We'll go scenario manager. And one of the options are summaries. This is what do you want to see in the summary. So the results cell, we want to click on H3. We'll type comma. Then we want I3, comma, and we want H6. So we want it under the different scenarios, tell us Boston's revenue, Boston's percentage, and the total of all three cities' revenue. We'll click OK. And so it pulls up a new tab with the relevant information based on the original figures increased by 4 and 10,000 respectively. Because the current values are the same as our original revenue figures, which yes, there's a spelling mistake, that's okay. I'm going to right click on D, we're going to delete column D because it's just a duplicate information. And then we want to go to B13 to B15, we're going to delete this information. And on cell B2, we wanted to read scenario summary for Boston. Revenue. We're going down to C10, and in this case we wanted this to say total Boston revenue. So that's C10. we're going to go to C11. We want this to say percent Boston revenue. Okay. And the bottom one, we'll call that total JCL revenue. So it's the revenue of all 3 cities. We'll right click on A heading and we'll delete that as well, just to clean it up. And we want to right click on row 1 and we'll delete that. So it cleans it all up and puts it in the top left hand section. We'll save that. And that's our clean looking scenario summary. One of the next functions we can look at is called how to project figures using a data table. So we'll click on the projected revenue. Let's go to K1 and we'll call this total Boston revenue. Okay, we'll auto fit K1 to make it fit. Under K2, let's go 419921. We'll take K2 to K6. We're going to go back to the Home tab. We want to go Fill. In this case, we want to create a series based on the starting point, so we'll create a series. And it's in a column, as we've highlighted. It's linear. And we want to type 50,000 as our step value, so count by $50,000. We'll click OK, and now we've got increments of $50,000 accordingly. Let's go to L1. We'll go equals I3, oh sorry, wrong cell, L1 equals I3 as our starting point. Okay, and we want to format that using percentage and 2 decimal places, so we have 3942. And we want to hide this value, so we'll go Format Cells. We've done before. We want to change the custom type to be 3 semicolons. We'll click OK. So the data is there, but it's hidden to the naked eye. Let's click on KI down to L6, so it's this little range of table. We will go to the Data tab, the WhatIfAnalysis, and in this case we want to create a table. And in this case, we've got the data in by columns, not by rows. So we'll hit Column Input Cell, so H3. We'll click OK. Pulls in the data accordingly. So it looks at the relationship of these data points to the H3 cell based on the heading, the contents of L1. It tells you if the revenue dropped to these ranges with no other changes, what the percentage of the total would be. So now we want to format these. 2 decimal places. We'll save our work. Alright, the next function we want to go over is goal seek. So we're on page 12-10 of the book if you're following along. So in this situation we want to click on B7, and right now our percent of total revenue for January across all 3 cities is 17.05%. Okay. And in this case we want to click the Data tab, and under WhatIfAnalysis we want to hit goal seek. In this case, we want it to become B7. We want it to be 18%. So what would it take to get to 18%? In this case, we only want to change cell B3. So if only Boston changed, nobody else, what would it take to get to 18%? Click OK. And we go through and say that it would require to hit 113,671 in order to hit 18%. We'll click OK. And we'll select L1 and we'll save. Alright, the next section is on page 1212. We want to look for solutions using the solver function. So what we want to do is move to the budget tab in the file. I'll zoom in a little bit for you. So we have the budget sheet. We want to click on the data tab. And over on the far right hand side there should be an analyze function where you have solver. And we have this dialog box which will walk through the different components. So in this case we want to set the objective to be I6, okay, which it defaulted to, and we want to get to a value of 2 million. So we want to get our total budget, which is currently at 2.275, down to the max budget of $2 million. So we've got the to the value of 2 million. What we want to change is we want to change B3 to B5. Okay. And we want to hit Control. We want to change E3 to E5. So the communications and the salaries. We'll add that. Okay. And in the cell reference box in this case, we want I3 to I5 be greater than or equal to cell C8, so it's minimum budgets per office. Add. Another function is we want E3 to E5 to be less than or equal to. We want the maximum salaries budget, so nobody can be over 400,000. Click Add, and then we want B3. Oops. Add, and then we want B3 to B5 to be greater than or equal to cell C10. And we will click OK. And I thought one errored out, so we're going to change this fixed one. That second one was the salaries piece, so E3 to E5. I thought I clicked in the wrong spot. We'll click OK. So now you can see our constraints. B3 to B5 must be greater than C10, so a minimum of $600,000 per office. E3 to E5 being salaries, less than C9, which means they all have to be under 400,000. And I3 to I5, sorry, B3 to B5 communications all have to be greater than the minimum communications budget of 65,000. And we're asked to solve. So we'll hit solve. It runs through a bunch of stuff in the background. See, now we have 2 million. Everybody's over 600. Everybody's minimum 65,000. Salaries are all under 400. And you have the option to keep it where it is, or you can restore the original values. In our case, we want to keep it where it is. We'll click OK. And we can save our file. Another function we can do is building data models. So we're going to open another file. So if I go to my downloads folder, and we want to open the ILEX 12-12, which is located in one of your start files. Okay, so we've got placements tab and employees tab, enable editing, and we'll go file, save as. In this case, we want to call this 12 placements. Okay, so one of the first things we need to do is make sure the add-on is added for Power Pivot. And actually I see the menu here, so it's already on, but I'll show you where it is. So if we go to File, Options, we want to go to Add-ins, and we want to go to the Manage arrow, and we want COM Add-ins, and we'll hit Go. Sorry. And then we want to make sure the Power Pivot for Excel checkbox is on. So Power Pivot for Excel checkbox is on in my case, yours may not be, so turn that on. Once it's on, click OK. Okay. Now, if you want to be on the Placements tab, you'll see the Power Pivot tab at the top, so click there. And in this case, we want to add the data model. Okay. It says where's the data for a table, and it's highlighting A1 to E97, which looks like it's all of the data accordingly. We'll click, and it has headers, which is important here. We'll click OK. Okay, so it pops up the Power Pivot for Excel dialog box. We want to hit switch to Microsoft, or switch to the workbook for a second, because we're going to add some more. So switch to workbook, we're back to the workbook. Let's go to the Employees tab. Make sure you're on A1. Again, I'll zoom in so you can see the data. A1. Power Pivot tab. Add the data model. We've got this table. It's got the headers. In this case, we'll click OK. Now, Let's go to the Table 1 Sheet tab, and we're going to double click on that, and we're going to call this Placements. Okay, enter to save that. And on Table 2, we're going to double click, we're going to call this Employees, and enter, just to give them proper names. Now we want to go to the top, we'll hit Design. Also, what this has done is it's pulled in copies into the Power Pivot function from the tables in the Excel book. So then you can marry the data in different ways, analyze it, etc., which we'll go through some examples in a moment. So, in this case, we want to go to the Design tab, and we want to create a relationship between the two tabs. So we'll click Create Relationship. And in the first case, we want to make sure this first one is employees, which it is. And we want to select the employee number field, which is defaulted to. And we want to create the relationship to the placements table. And in this case, we want to make the relationship to recruiter ID. So we'll highlight it. And we'll click OK. So now what it's doing is looking for matches of the recruiter ID to the employee number to align the two tables. We'll click OK. If we click the Home tab, on the far right hand side there's an option to view it in a diagram. So it shows how it maps to the two different tables. Let's switch back to the workbook. So top bar, we want to switch to workbook. It should be on the Employees Sheet tab. Let's go to cell B2. We want to change this name to be And Flood. Okay, so let's go Power Pivot tab. We want to manage our Power Pivot data. We'll change it back to Data View. Okay, and we want to refresh, and you'll see that it pulls in the data into the Power Pivot table. So you see flood, close, wideness. You can see that it's been updated. Save our work. And now we want to create a Power Pivot table. So we've got the Employees tab open. We want to click the first cell under the column, header. So we're adding the column. Go equals if. We'll do square bracket. Okay. And we want to double click Years Employed. Alright, sorry about that, it jumped out on me, so let's do equals if, bracket, square bracket. You get the names of the different parameters, so we'll double click Years Employed to pull that in. And we'll type greater than 6. So if it's greater than 6, then we'll call this a quote senior recruiter. Another quote. Otherwise, quote junior recruiter. Quote. Press enter, so it populates that accordingly across the whole column. We want to double click on the heading, and we'll call that job title. Press enter to save that. If you look in the background, it's not there yet, give it time. Okay. We want to go over to the placements table. We want to hit the first cell below the revenue data. So we'll go to the bottom. So, actually, it's right there. I apologize. And we want to hit the auto sum button, which is in the top home menu. Oh, sorry, wrong cell. We'll delete that for a second. Delete from model. I want to go to the revenue column. Hit auto sum, so it's a sum of revenue. Okay, we'll widen that so you can see it all. So we see 298.34, and we want to apply the currency formatting, and we want to English US. So now it formats that accordingly. And then we want to select the data in the revenue column. So let's highlight all of it. Actually, we'll just go like this. And we want English United States as well, so it applies it as currency. Let's widen the recruiter ID field so you can see the whole title. And your work should compare with what's on the top of page 1217 at this point. Apologize, I had to get a cough out. Hopefully it pauses for a few minutes. So now back up on the Home tab, we want to hit the Pivot Table button. And we want to create a new worksheet. So new worksheet option. We'll click OK. In this case, let's double click that. We'll call this Pivot Table. Okay, and you'll see when you click on the pivot table, you'll have a pop-up at the far right-hand side which has all your pivot table fields. So in this case, we want to click down in the employees table, and we want to bring in the name. Let's bring in the office. For example, over here at the bottom in the rows, we can drag office above name, so it's all office then name. Then let's go up to the placements section. We'll expand the placements table. We want the division, and we want to move it from the rows. So you can just click with your left mouse button, drag it over to column. So that's by division and columns. We want the quarter checkbox, but we want it as a filter. So we'll bring that up here as a filter. So just click and drag. And then we want revenue, which then it pulls up our sum of revenue. We'll go to Pivot Table Analyze button. You'll see at the far right hand side, it's showing all the different functions. So if you hit field headers, you'll see that it just cleans up the presentation. So when you're done your pivot table, it's always nice to turn off the field headers. And we'll save that. And that's basically the intro to pivot tables. The biggest thing is to take some play with your field locations and what gets displayed where. So for example, if say you only want in quarter one, you can change the filter, select multiple, expand this, maybe you want to turn off 1, 2, 3 and just have 4. We've done some of this work before. Click all. If you wanted divisions as a filter, you can just drag from the columns over to here. So you can filter it. If you want to filter by office instead. Okay, it's very intuitive how that works. Hopefully you found that helpful for an introduction.